features, it had a solid test coverage, pretty small code base. Everything seemed good, except this was constantly crashing and constantly was suffering from some performance issues. The prices would be delayed, causing trades not being able to be executed. We tried to apply some fixes, but all of the attempts failed. Eventually, the engineering team told me that this service was unfixable and we had to rewrite it. So we decided that Node.js was the problem, not us. Back in the day, we thought that Clojure was the best programming language in the world, which still is true, by the way. So we decided, okay, if we replace the problematic Node.js with the best programming language in the world, this is bound to solve all of our problems, right? Okay, we rewrote this library, and we rewrote it pretty quickly. But we encountered new problems. For instance, it turned out that one of the core Clojure libraries, named CoreAsync, was super buggy, and the upstream maintainers didn't want to fix the bugs that we encountered. Also, it turned out that not everybody in the company was nearly as excited about Clojure as the people who worked on the translation of the service from Node.js to Clojure. Many thought that Clojure was very weird. They didn't want to be bothered to learn it. And this created much friction within the team. Eventually, after a lot of frustration, a lot of shouting, screaming, and some light fights, Irish style, we decided to rewrite this back in Node.js. The rewritten version had no performance issues and no crashes. So clearly, Node.js wasn't our real problem. On one hand, after this story, I was really depressed because I had scientifically proven that even the best programming language in the world doesn't guarantee the success of your projects. On the other hand, I was really encouraged to learn that everything is fixable, even supposedly unfixable projects. This was also a nice reminder that a tool is only as good as the person using it. If you give somebody a lightsaber, this doesn't make them immediately a Jedi, right? Maybe, maybe not. There is also the important consideration, how do you pick the tools, the languages, the frameworks that you use in your company? You shouldn't be picking them top-down. We shouldn't be picking them without a wide debate in the company, because ultimately, if the people who are supposed to use some technology stack are not happy, they don't enjoy it, you are going to regret it. And here we get to some slightly different examples. How do we combat complexity? How do we combat this add more features aspect of the Groundhog Day development method? Selfishly, I'm going to give you an example from one of my personal projects. Robocop is Ruby lint tool. It basically checks for all sorts of problems in your Ruby applications. It's a pretty big project and a pretty popular one. Each version gets something like 1.5 million downloads. But the complexity of the project has stayed more or less the same since the initial release almost 10 years ago. Why so? Because I had a very aggressive strategy to fight the addition of more complexity. If somebody suggests a good feature that adds a lot of complexity, I just reject it because I don't want to be maintaining this complexity. Features that are not aligned with the core goals of the project immediately get rejected. Okay, it would be nice to add some integration for version control tools in a linter so you can just check the files that you changed, right? But this adds a lot of complexity and it's not going to happen. If somebody suggests supporting an obscure coding style, this gets rejected because we shouldn't bother. If somebody suggests new runtime dependencies to be added, I'm extremely skeptical, and probably this is going to be rejected. And I'm a big believer in removing features. Most systems just are adding stuff. If I notice that something is not used, I just delete it. It causes some problem in the short term, but it is what it is. I think that the screen was blinking that I'm out of time, but I think that this is a mistake, so I'll continue speaking. 5 minutes maybe? 10, because we're old friends. Okay. So simplicity is the design choice. That's how I want to close. You have to really work for simplicity. You have to think about simplicity every single day. Most people start thinking about the problems the moment they encounter them, but you should be thinking before you start every day on the job, and you're going to find that you're going to have significantly fewer complexity issues. That's one of my all-time favorite talks by Rich Hickey. I highly recommend to everybody to take a look at it. Um, Other things that are important as the general recipe. Okay, so invent a new simple thing. How do you combat complexity afterwards? You just keep it simple. I told you, you limit external dependencies, you're very cautious with adding new features, you remove the stuff that they don't work out. Okay, people are going to tell you that breaking changes suck, and they kind of do, but in the long run, the maintenance overhead that you are going to encounter is going to suck even more. It's going to make you cry, and that's not good. Don't rewrite anything big unless you've experienced failures at least 20 times in your career and you really understand the implications. Say no to hype-driven development. Don't rewrite a project every year in the latest and greatest technology, because if you're always chasing after the next hot technology, then you're never building anything valuable. Okay, you cannot have this year Erlang, next year Go, Elixir, hype, whatever language. That's bad. Incremental design is good, some design is even better, and legacy is just a synonym of complex. Projects do not become legacy because they're old. They become legacy because they were poorly engineered and they go to the point of 4. Complexity sucks, I want out, that's bad. Microservices are not a silver bullet. You used to have one problem, you're going to have many problems, plus one more. How do you integrate all of those services together, which is a tough nut to crack, let's put it like this. And you have to learn how to deal effectively with legacy code. I'll just mention 2 of my favorite books on the subject because we're out of time. I still love reading books, and probably I should revisit my old talk. So to wrap it up, what is the best way to learn that fire burns? Somebody can tell you that fire is going to burn you, but you're probably going to be skeptical. You want to get burned to check it. You have to get burned. That's how life works. There is no substitute for experience. I told you a bunch of things, but you're going to ignore all of them after my talk. And that's a given. But still, I think that once you get burned, you are maybe going to remember about some of the things I mentioned today, and you're going to come back to this talk with a different understanding, and you're going to get something useful out of it. That's all from me. It was a pleasure. Enjoy the rest of the conference.
Check, check. Oh, it's working, all right. Is the other way to unmute. Thank you, Bujidar. That was really, really interesting. We won't have time for questions, and I have one very important announcement to make before we hop on to the next talk. And I'll need a volunteer from you. Someone to come here on the stage. Come. Who wants to? Come on. Come on, we don't have much time. Come on. Just someone come up here. Rossi, please. Now we'll be doing magic tricks. No. So, Rossi, can you put forward your badge? So, everyone, this is Rossi, and this is her badge. Can you put forward the badge? This is very important because if you don't wear it around your neck, you will often get stopped and asked, where is your badge? Because you will need it for everything here related to the conference. So, please wear your badge somewhere visible in your back, or in your backpack. Is not visible. Just to put this clear. All right. In 5 minutes, we are continuing with the next talk. So shake your feet, hands, and get back here. Thank you.
Să se откачи това.
Is this your doggle? I will need it up. I got one. Thanks.
great. Thank you. Appreciate it.
We are check. We are starting in 3 minutes, so please take your seats.
Yeah, feel great. I'm always a little nervous. If you're not, you show I'm passionate.
Okay. So we have one more talk, and after that, we have lunch. So, here in the stage, we already have Matt Wanheim. He is going to talk about how to survive the commoditization of our jobs. So, if the AI is going to take our jobs, is HackConf 2020 going to be led by robots? Am I a robot myself right now? Nobody knows. So, for answers of all these questions and many others, please your warm welcome to Matt.
Thank you. I'd like to take a minute just to thank the HackConf organizers and those people that found the speakers for this conference, Teddy, Tony, the production engineers that were working on setting all this up. I heard that they worked all night, and when I got here this morning, I saw that they were hard at it. And I know this stuff takes a lot of work, so we really appreciate the effort that you guys put into it. I think you did a great job. So I'm really glad to be here. I lived in Bulgaria from 1993 to 1995. And in 2002, I opened a wholly owned subsidiary of my company in the US here in Bulgaria. So I've been working here the last 17 years with offshore developers and with Bulgarians. And I've come over these years, these past 26 years, to love Bulgaria. And I really want to see Bulgaria, and I want to see Bulgarians succeed. And so I'm here today to warn you guys about something important. That is that your tech skills, they're commodity. Just because people are paying you a lot of money right now for what you do doesn't change this fact. And you have to be working as hard as you can to make yourself non-commodity. So I put up here a preview of some things that will help you do this, and I'd like you to take a few seconds right now to look them over. I want them to be in the back of your mind as I talk today. I have a friend in the United States, in Utah, where I live. He's a mortgage broker, so what that means is that he buys and he sells loans for homes. And this friend of mine, he's lived in my neighborhood 4 times now in 4 different houses. The housing market in the 2000s began to heat up, and as he got more and more successful and was making more and more money, and opportunities would open up to move into a different home, he would move into a different home. He liked the neighborhood, so he stayed there, but he kept switching houses. Eventually, as things got really warm, he was making a ton of money. He had opened up over a dozen offices, 15 in fact, and had people working in them, was selling a ton of mortgages, and he eventually moved out of the neighborhood. So he moved about 30 minutes away to a farming community, and he bought some land, and he bought a nice house, and he bought himself this Jeep. So a Jeep is a 4x4. You guys have probably seen them. They're really famous, and he probably had, I don't know, $35,000 or $40,000 in this Jeep. He didn't drive it every day. It was just a toy for him. There's this place in Utah that's called Moab, and it's beautiful. It has incredible scenery. It's really unlike anything most people have ever seen before. If you haven't been there, it may as well be Mars. It's so different. The landscape is so different. And there's this endless terrain that's there that is great for hiking and mountain biking, dirt biking, ATVing, really anything that you like to do outdoors. And it's one of Utah's many phenomenal playgrounds. It happens to be a premier destination for jeeping. And my friend with this nice Jeep that he built, he goes down there a couple times a year to play. And out there, there's this trail. They name all these trails, there are 100 of them out there, and they rate the trails on difficulty. And there's this trail called Hell's Revenge. And there's this obstacle on the trail. It's this broad swath of slick rock. It's like a super highway of rock, and we drive around in these Jeeps, and out there's this big hole in the rock. And they call that hole Mickey's hot tub. So my friend with his Jeep, he decides that he's going to try to go through Mickey's hot tub, and he takes his Jeep, and he drives down into this thing. And when you drive into it, it's not very steep. But as you try to drive out the other side, it gets really, really steep, and he can't get the traction that he needs to get out of Mickey's hot tub. And so he gives it some gas, and he gives it some gas, and the front end starts hopping. You can see this on YouTube, by the way. It's got 1.3 million views, last I checked. And he rolls his Jeep over backwards. He totals the Jeep. Funny thing is, look at his face. He's smiling. Why? It's no big deal. The money's flowing. Jeep gets fixed. Jeep even gets upgraded. He's back in business. Life is good. But about the time that this Jeep wreck is going on, there's also a train wreck that's going on. The housing bubble bursts in the U.S., and it's a total catastrophe for the economy. My friend's cash flow, it dries up, and then it just completely reverses. And this is on a major scale, and he winds up bankrupted. He loses the land, he loses the house, and he loses the Jeep. You see, my friend was selling a commodity. The market economics were perfect for it at the time because everybody was buying houses. Everybody was upgrading their house. And he took advantage of the economics. And why wouldn't he? The rest of us would too. But when the demand dried up, there was way too much supply. And the market didn't need him because there were a million others that were just like him. In organizations, there is this age-old debate between sales and engineering. The sales guys, they say, look, if we didn't sell, you wouldn't have a job. And the engineers say, well, great, if we didn't build the product, you wouldn't have anything to sell. I want you guys to understand that in this argument, in my experience, sales is king. I believe in a pyramid model, and the customer is at the top of that pyramid, and everybody below the customer supports the levels that are closer to the customer. In software development, what this means, you've got customer, you've got sales, you have product ownership, and then you have engineering. It means that engineering is at the bottom of the heap. So engineers support product owners. Engineers are, in fact, commodity. You buy them, you sell them. I can get a .NET SQL developer who is working on a banking product. I can hire him, I can put him on a healthcare product, and his skill set transfers smoothly. I can't take a banking subject matter expert who is working on a banking product and move them to a healthcare product and have the transition go smoothly. So I'm going to say it again. Engineering skill sets are commodity. I'm on an airplane in 2015. I'm flying out of Sofia. And I'm reading the in-flight magazine on Bulgaria Air. And in it, there's an article in the January 2015 issue. And it says, according to the Bulgarian Industrial Association, from 2008 until the third quarter of 2014, the average wage in Bulgaria grew by 49.5%, under an approximate 14% real growth of productivity. Now, I'm not an economist, and I don't want to start an economics fight here, but I do want to say that as a person who buys services from Bulgaria, nobody who buys services from Bulgaria is going to like this statistic. My friend, when he wrecked the Jeep, he actually got surprised by both crashes, the Jeep wreck and the train wreck that was going on in the housing market, because, at least in part, because the good times were making it hard for him to see the risks that were out there. In the tech industry, we also have risks. Those risks include globalization. They include the commoditization of technology. They include artificial intelligence. They include new labor markets. We simply can't afford to be complacent just because the picking is easy right now. The economic reality is we are commodity if we don't produce value that the next person or labor market or technology cannot produce. And when the bubble bursts, like it did with the mortgage industry, and like it has before in the tech industry, we won't survive against cheaper providers of the same commodity. For those of you that aren't old enough to remember it, there was a tech crash in 2000 that's now called the dot-com crash, when exactly this happened. And you guys need to understand that with what's been going on in the last 20 years here in Bulgaria, Bulgaria simply isn't the cheapest producer of software in the world anymore, and this is not by a large margin. So how do we survive? The fact is that not all is lost, but we have to maintain a relentless focus on delivering value. So there's something that I call a value curve, and we can graph it. On your y-axis, we have value. On the x-axis, we have time. And almost every team that I've ever worked with produces a value curve that looks something like this. And they build and they build and they build. Foundation, scaffolding, architecture. Božidar talked about this today. How long it takes projects that you think are going to take 6 months, how long it really takes them. And there's all this promise that it's going to pay huge returns as soon as it's ready. And guess what? It sucks. And you know why? Because time equals money. So the business is in a bunch of money, and what do they have to show for it? Nothing. It upsets them, and it should. The team loses credibility, and they should. The team says, hey, we just need another sprint or two, and the business doesn't believe them. The business thinks they're headed for 2 times the cost, and there still won't be any value. And guess what? They're probably right. So we need to do everyone a favor, and we need to consciously strive for a value curve that looks like this instead. And this isn't necessarily a novel idea. There are people that have written on this. Sometimes they call it concavity. Sometimes they call it convexivity. When the business sees good early value, they recognize your value, and they should. The team gains credibility. When the project slows down, the business trusts the team productivity. All projects over time develop friction. Quality becomes more important than speed of new features. Customers want slower upgrades because it's painful for them to do the upgrade in the first place. Teams and dependencies get added. Code bases become more complex. Technical debt gets incurred. In this type of curve, even though the new value that's added starts to slow down, what is lost in new value gained or in new value added is gained in sustained value over the time. Now, the business eventually spends the same amount of money that they would have in the first place, but they have revenue to sustain that ongoing investment. And that makes all the difference. We need to own our value. We need to align our value curve with how our organization measures or judges value. Now, there are some ingredients to value, and I'm going to talk about 3 of them. I think these are maybe the 3 most important ingredients that I've identified over the years of playing this game. One of them is technical capabilities. So for all this talk that your skill set is commodity, you still need it in order to add value. But we assume that this technical capability is there when we hire you. If we didn't, we wouldn't have hired you in the first place. Once we hire you, you need to continue to sharpen your skills. Even though they're commodity, you need to continue to sharpen your skills. But I want you to remember something. The strength of your technical capability is irrelevant to either one of those value curves. When you're working on, or I'm sorry, it's irrelevant to which either one of those value curves. And the reason it's irrelevant is that if you're working on the wrong things in the wrong order at the wrong time, you aren't adding value no matter how strong your technical skills are. Now, the second thing is product capability. Product capability comes from your product owner. A piece of advice that I have for you developers is to not hijack her backlog with your technical stories. I see this recurring case all the time where a product owner comes and sticks a functional story on the backlog, and the team says, we need to add a couple spikes to figure out what we're doing. So they throw a couple spikes on the board. Well, those 2 spikes then turn into 10 technical stories. And now they've got 10 technical stories, and the team is working on these technical stories. What happens to the functional story over the next 5 sprints while they're working on these 10 technical stories? It gets carried over from sprint to sprint to sprint. What does that do? Well, guess what? Sales isn't going out and selling those 4 third normal form tables that you created in your database to the customer. And so they're not generating revenue. They're not generating value for the organization. This is exactly what I'm talking about, that it stretches this value curve out to the right instead of making it convex. You need to support your PO and to help her succeed. POs, for all you POs out there, don't get lazy. Focus on the strength of your backlog. The strength of a backlog, I measure it by the quantity and the quality of the stories that are in it and how well those stories are organized on the backlog. Here's what happens if you get lazy as a PO. product ownership begins to filter down into the team. A team that's been on a product for 20 years doesn't really need a PO. They know everything about the product. They talk to the sales guys at the water cooler. They get on customer support calls. They understand what the problems are and what the customers are complaining about. They're staring at the functionality that is there day in, day out. They understand how they can make it better, how they can make it perform faster. When that happens, what do you need a PO for? The same thing happens when a PO is writing really high-level stories and expecting the team to munge those stories down into detailed stories. Essentially, the team is doing the product ownership work. As that filters down, if the team is doing that product ownership work, what do we need the PO for? What is the PO? The PO is friction at that point. The third thing here is system capability. Now, system capability it's a form of technical capability, but it's system specific. It's data models. It's security and authentication. It's architectural constraints or services or logging. And in order to develop system capability, you have to learn the system. In addition to learning the system, you need to find the right people who can help you acquire the system capability that you need. And then you need to make it easy for them to help you. Now, I want to make one other point while I'm sitting on this slide, and that is that it's really hard to build value if you're moving around from company to company all the time. Moving around a lot may help to build technical skill set, but it comes at the cost of product and system capability. How do you get to know a product overnight? How do you get to know a system overnight? And so a piece of advice that I have for you is to find a place that you love to be and where you can add value, and then stay there as long as you can. There's something out there that is called the keyhole effect. I call it the keyhole effect. And the idea is this, that keyholes exist between any two groups, even groups of one, that are communicating. And they're interesting because I feel like you can either look through them or listen through them or speak through them, but you can't do any more than one thing at a time through them. I see keyholes between sales and engineering, between the business and engineering, even between business and sales. I see keyholes between any two teams. I see keyholes between architecture and dev. I see keyholes between friends, and I see keyholes between spouses. And I believe that keyholes are the enemy of product capability and system capability. And so they're the enemy of adding value. And there's an inefficiency coefficient anytime communication goes through a keyhole. Everything is restricted. You don't get the full picture. I'm looking over there at the business, and they've just pivoted their requirement for the 15th time on me in the last 2 weeks. And I've had to restart my sprint again, and I'm upset about it. And I wonder to myself, are they idiots? Why did they do this to me? And I can tell you that they're not idiots. What it really is we don't see everything that they see. And as we look through this keyhole, we just have limited vision. And so it's hard to get the full picture. Another problem with keyholes is a lot of times they get out of sync. So I might have one person on one side of the keyhole, and they're talking through the keyhole, and the person on the other side of the keyhole, they're looking through the keyhole. And I might have someone who is looking through the keyhole on one side, and the other person's listening through the keyhole. Or maybe both people are talking to each other, and nobody's listening to each other. I found that when you're communicating through a keyhole, it's easily an inefficiency coefficient of 10x, and it's often much more than that. Maybe it's 100x in a lot of cases. And I'm going to give you an example of this. Maybe you guys have seen this. I see it all the time. I get a product owner who is remote from the team. And the product owner comes to a planning meeting or refinement meeting, and they're talking to the team, and the first thing is there's a Scrum Master who's co-located with the team, and the Scrum Master is driving the board. And the product owner says, hey, will you open that story that talks about X? And the Scrum Master goes and opens a story that talks about X, and the product owner says, no, not that story. I meant that other story. So the Scrum Master closes out of that story, and they open up a different story, and the product owner says, no, not that one, 2 down from that one. So they go down 2 and open that, and says, no, that's not the one. I actually meant next column over and 1 up from there. And they go and they open that story. Now, how long did that take for the product owner to drive the Scrum Master to open a story? And how long would it have taken if the product owner were driving and had just opened up the story that they knew that they wanted to show the team? The keyhole effect and this inefficiency coefficient happens to be substantially worse when the team is offshore from the customer, from the organization, meaning the product organization. A lot of you are offshore. You're offshore services. And it's tough because you have language differences and you have cultural differences and you have time zone differences that really impede things. And so the strategy for dealing with that is to reduce and to optimize communication that's running through the keyhole. I ask my teams to isolate heavy lifting onto one side of the keyhole or the other in order to eliminate communication that has to pass through the keyhole. I ask my teams to shrink the communication that goes through the keyhole as well in order to optimize it. So an example of heavy lifting is the refinement process. If I can have a product owner that works with an engineer who is in the room with them around a whiteboard, and they can refine a story together in the same room, it's pretty efficient. And the 2 of them together can optimize and the communication that's going to the offshore team and can preempt a lot of the questions that are going to come from the team. Once we get the team on the phone and we're communicating through the keyhole, we've got 8 people on the telephone, and the inefficiency is exaggerated because of the number of the people that are on the phone. That's what I mean by isolating. On the side of the engineers, when they have a problem and they need help with system capability, if they take the time to build a flow diagram and to really understand the problem and to understand the language of the person they're going to be asking for help from, then it saves a bunch of time when they get that person on the phone and makes the communication more efficient. For shrinking communications, one of the best things that I've found for it is to ensure that stories are very, very small and end-user testable. You can also develop soft skills to help communication move more efficiently through the keyhole. These help you to create a team with the PO or the subject matter expert. By soft skills, what I mean is how you talk to them, how you listen to them, how you own your task. Not the technical one, but the value-creating one. How you help your PO avoid risks and how quickly you adapt when the business pivots. Another piece of advice here is to always use the best possible method of communication when talking to the keyhole, and I'll give you a hint, it's never email. Domain language helps a lot when it's available, and when it's not, learn the language of the person on the other side of the keyhole and use it instead of your language. And I'm not talking English and Bulgarian here. I'm talking product and tech, for example. Finally, know when to communicate, so be aware of the time zone you're in versus the person that you're communicating with, and know how to communicate, which is really a cultural question. So I'm going to come back here to my slide, my original slide of how to survive the commoditization of your job. Own your value. Remember that it is you who owns the value you add or you don't add. It's your responsibility because you're the one who is selling your wage. Don't get complacent. Times may not always be so good, so don't be surprised by a crash that happens. Always strive to add value. If you're going to do one thing, think every day, am I adding value? How am I adding value? And what does my value curve look like? Value is never commodity. You have to know your organization and how they judge value and then consciously align with how they judge that value. Do keep your skills sharp, your tech skills sharp, even though they're commodity, you really can't succeed without them. And support your PO. Speak her language. Don't put technical stories on her backlog. If she's functional, obviously. Learn the bigger system you're part of. Identify key resources who can help you, and then make it easy for them to help you. And then do everything that you can to mitigate the keyhole effect by reducing and by optimizing communication that goes through it. Over the past 26 years, you guys have been good enough to share Bulgaria with me. And I really do love you for it and love Bulgaria for it. And so I want to extend an invitation to each and every one of you. I want to share Utah with you guys. So if you would like to visit Utah, reach out to me. I'd love to host you. I'd love to talk tech with you. I'd love to take you around and share the many great things that Utah has to offer you guys. So thank you very much for allowing me to be here today with you.
That was really awesome. Sadly, we don't have time for questions, but Matt is going to be here, so yeah, Matt is going to be here, so don't be shy, ask him anything you want. We are making a lunch break. The lunch is going to be served outside, and we should be back here and there because we're kicking the second track, so you can join it or watch the stream over there.
Also, for the next couple hours, I'll be down at the OSI booth, so if anybody has questions or would like to talk, just come on down and see me, please.
That's great. So be right back at 1:30. Have your great lunch.
Thanks. Appreciate it. Thanks.
Feeling better in my head.
Пробуем 1, 2, 3, микрофон, чувствую. All right, we are starting in 7 minutes at exactly 1.5. For those of you who wonder where the second track is going to be, it's room 3.2 to my left. Just so you know, this is the main hall, track 1, track 2 is 3.2. And we are starting in 7 minutes, so get ready. Check, check. 5 minutes, we're starting in 5 minutes. Check, check. Starting in 4 minutes. This is track 1, hole number 3. To the left, up the stairs, up the lounge is 3.2, where track 2 is going to be. To the right, overflow room. 2 more minutes. Did you enjoy the lunch? Yeah. Yeah. Just yeah? Or yeah. I think it was quite delicious, those sandwiches. Did you manage to get a cookie? No? Well, sorry about you. I think there are still cookies left, but not for long. All right. So get comfortable.
I have it. Just need to reset it. It's about 30 minutes, and I will, and yeah, I'll leave it. Yeah, take your time first. Oh, they know.
All right, people, smile. A big smile. All right. Still more people streaming in. Please take your seats. For the last time, at least for now, this is hole number 3, track 1. Track 2 is up the launch in hole number 3.2. All right. Our next speaker is Ayelet Sachto. Ayelet is a passionate problem solver with 15 years of experience in different companies from big enterprises to small startups. Currently, she works as a cloud engineer, and her talk is going to be, if you can drive, you can architect the system. So, please, a very big and warm round of applause for Ayelet.
If I would ask you, which car should I buy? Which car would you recommend me to buy? Would it be something like this? Or maybe something like this? Let's say I'm using the car only once a week or every day for 5 hours. Will that affect your answer? And if I'll tell you I have $1 million for the car at 1,000, will your answer remain the same? And as everything in life has a price tag, what about now? So faced with those questions, how many have actually stopped and asked, why do I need a car for? Raise your hand. So a few. So for the one of you who did wonder, I will tell you that I need a car to go from my house to my work. Pretty straightforward, right? Do you have enough information right now to make informed decision? And if I'll even add that until recently, I lived in Tel Aviv, and the distance between my house to my work was about 600 meters. And if you're considering traffic and finding parking lot, using a car will take me about 20 minutes and walking about 10. Would you still recommend me to buy a car? Any car? So what other alternatives do I have? So I said walking, you can use a bike, a scooter. If you have any other country outside of Israel, you can use public transportation. Or if money is not the issue, even a helicopter or something. So you probably guessed it from my answer, my questions. The reasoning, the motivation is critical in order to make informed decision. And if we don't understand the problem properly, how can we solve it? If we don't understand the real need, we can solve only its symptoms, not the real pain. And that's true when you're driving, on your daily life, and in system architecture. So don't worry, no driver license is required here. But if we implement similar logic as we do as driver in our daily life to solution architecture, we can build better products. So hello, my name is Ayelet Sachdo, and I'm a cloud engineer at Google. I have 15 years of experience, as I was introduced, and resilience, throughput, scale, performance, only a few of the concerns that I'm using on a daily basis and solving on a daily basis. And that's even before we had cloud to mitigate part of those concerns, right? And from my opinion, solution architecture is not just saved for the architects in the cloud, for the developers. It's for all of us in the tech world. It's for QA, for product. It's for communicating between teams, between product, between solutions. It's the entire pipeline. And one of the things that I kept seeing again and again throughout my career is that even the best engineers with the best intention struggled with implementing solution architecture principles. And I'm emphasizing that it's not an issue of talent or motivation. It's an issue of awareness. So hopefully today we will see a few of those principles, and I will talk about 8 points to notice when you are architecting your services. So what is architecture? Architecture is translating requirements to a technical solution. And in that process, the complexity, the constraint, limit what we build. And the limitation lead us to choosing our building blocks. Now, you may think that you can use pattern for that, right? So for the one of you who are not aware, patterns are a reusable general solution in a given context. And we have architectural patterns, we have design patterns, and we have cloud patterns. But today, I want to talk about the entire solution. And patterns are not solving the entire problem. There are a specific solution in a specific scenario. And I love this quote, something that an old colleague of mine used to say. If it's not a new problem, it's not interesting to solve. And think about it. Do you want to solve the same thing again and again? Do you want to resolve the same conflicts again and again? No, we want new challenge. We want interesting problems. We want to challenge ourselves and challenge others. So today, we are not talking about using patterns. Patterns are great. Best practices are great, but they are not the entire solution. So let's say you did buy the car. So the one in the audience that do have a car probably used this service in the past, right? A car wash service. And a car wash service usually does not start from a big enterprise. Doesn't start from an entire chain. It starts something like this, right? A person with a bucket cleaning a car. And that is also very similar to our services. We are not starting with a big, complex monster. We are starting with a service that's running on our own local machine. It can be in a Docker container, a VM. It can be a service in the background. But something specific that answers our need. And during the process, we are adding more complexity. We are adding more constraints. And one of the earlier constraints that we have is accessibility. I want people to come to my car wash. I want people to use my service. And in order to do so, I need to allow them access. But if I open my service to other users, if I open my car wash, then other constraints will raise, right? I will need to think about security. I will need to think about performance. Can I handle all those users? And that, for me, is what architecture is all about, the trade-off. Understanding that in each solution, there's positives and there's the cons that we need to think about, the challenges that will rise from this specific solution. So, who saw this structure sometime in their lifetime? For the one of you who just raised their head, it's a picture of a bridge. And a bridge is an amazing solution. It provides you access between unreachable places safely. But it's also a costly solution, right? And what about this bridge? It's also very massive. It's also very costly. But is it a good solution? Maybe you can think about it again. So if it's not clear from the picture, this bridge leads to nowhere. It's an actual bridge in Germany, and it cost a lot to build. And we all have those solutions that maybe will be great patterns, be great best practices, but in our solutions are needed. And I invite you to think about your useless bridges in your own solutions. What maybe in the beginning was thought as a great solution, but actually it's just costly. And when I'm saying cost, it's not just infrastructure, it's performance, it's appearance in front of users. It's the entire effect. So understanding our constraints, and when I'm saying constraint, the real constraint, not our assumption, not think that we handle in previous project and work for us then. No. Our current, recent constraints. And we need to understand that expensive is not always the best. And perfect does not always serve us in this given solution. The real constraint can be reaching between areas, can be providing user experience, can be just an MVP. Depends on our own context and our own needs, our own limitation. There is no one size suits us all. And the best way to understand what are real constraints are to ask questions. Asking questions is the best way to challenge yourself and challenge others. And in that process, we can build better products. We can make better decisions. Ask, is it the real pain? How it works like it today? How it should work? Ask other people what do they think? How they will resolve the issue. And we're actually doing it all the time in our daily life. We ask ourselves questions, and we are not even aware of it. So even on the road, let's say we don't have laws. Will you drive at the same speed when you're on the highway or inside the city next to a school? Hopefully not. Will you buy the same car if you use it 40 hours a week versus 40 hours a year? Will a country, or should a country, invest the same resources in a highway that serves millions compared to a countryside road that's serving a few? And without even answering it, you know the answers, because we keep challenging ourselves. We keep thinking of that logic every day, all the time. As drivers, as passengers, when we're crossing the roads, we always question the motivation. We question and we analyze the risks. And we should do the same thing when we architect our product. Now, I want to talk about the context. And a lot of time people say context just relate to the technical aspect. But context is much more than that. Context is, where do you work? Are you part of a big organization or a small startup? Are you part of a big team that have a lot of resources, or you're just trying to build an MVP, a POC at the moment? What are your resources? What are the tools that are in your disposal? If you are part of a company that's using DevOps methodologies, do you have pipelines already set? Do you need to integrate to those pipelines, or you need to set everything from scratch? And if we talk about your context, it's also relevant to understand what are limitations. And sometimes people really think about the budget as the bottom line. No, this is my budget. I cannot be flexible in that regard. But it's actually not true. Budget, in some cases, can be very flexible. If you're part of a big organization, it will be easier to change the budget than to change the team, to change how long will this tool be maintained and who will maintain it. If you're working in current processes, you'll probably not be able to change your entire organization, your entire R&D, but you will be able to change the bottom line of the budget. But in startup, budget is the final line in some cases, but we are more flexible if it will be an MVP, and maybe we can add flexibility after it, or maybe we just will learn a new language. We stay up later and develop the product. And there's only 4 people that will maintain that product. So it will be easier in that regard of documentation and flexibility. And I want to mention something in regard to scale. Sorry. Dramatic. And I want to mention something regarding scale. People are throwing that phrase all over, right? And I think that sometimes being abused. And they are also using it in different ways. People mean different things when they use scale. And from my opinion, when people are usually talk about scale in regard to microservices, they are talking about scale of people. They are talking about scale of the deployment process, the development process, and not scale of services. And think about it, like if you have one service that does it all, you don't need network, you don't need to think about bandwidth, you don't need to think about it like a black box. If everybody is the ones that are maintaining them, then it's easier to think about it. And that's something that you need to think about when you're designing your solution. And the final note in regarding to context, think about what is your production readiness. Every service has its own production readiness. Every service is different. And for one service, it's okay if it won't be highly available, and for another, it's critical that it will be because it's customer facing or it's dealing with payments. And I want to give you another example from Israel. So I grew up in the north, and my family living in Haifa. And until I moved to London, I lived in Tel Aviv, in the center of Israel. And to go from Haifa to Tel Aviv, you take the shore road. It's pretty new, it's well maintained, it has a beautiful view of the shore, and it's the most efficient one. But what happens if a car turns over in the middle of the road? Let's say if you can see it between Hadera and Netanya, somewhere in the middle. Then Waze or Maps will probably suggest you something like this. Route 4, which is not as fast. It has a lot of traffic lights, and it goes to the city, so there's a lot of distractions. But our user will not be stuck in Haifa. We'll still be able to reach Tel Aviv, or from Tel Aviv to Haifa, depends where you are. And if you noticed it before, that road was not even suggested by maps in the first time, because it's not that efficient. But we do need that road to be highly available, even if that means that the service, the experience will be degraded. And that is something that's also relevant to our services. We may need an alternative route that is not that efficient. Let's say our users in Europe usually use services in Europe, and our US customers using US services. But if there's a problem, we don't want our entire region, the entire customers, to be stopped. We don't want our services and their transaction to be lost. So we'll offer an alternative route, AJ route, through US, which will be less effective, will take longer, but we will not lose them. And another note, even if a car will turn over, a truck will turn over, there will be specific kind of car that will be able to pass. Can you think about a few? Cars that even in a case of an accident and the road is blocked, will be able to pass. Excellent. Emergency services, ambulance, policemen, rescue. And our services also have those. Our critical customers, our critical partners, our critical transactions, they will get prioritized. And if your service do have those needs, those special priority cases, then you'll need to think about it from the beginning. You will need to think about your prioritization in your design. Set priorities. Everything is important, right? But we cannot solve every bug. We cannot design for everything. We cannot think about any concern and solve every problem. We have limited resources, right? We have limited funds, we have limited people. So what are our own priorities? For one service, it maybe be AJ. For another, maybe an ETL, it will be performance. It will be fast, but not highly available. So each service has its own priorities and its own concerns. Traffic. Let's talk about traffic in our services. So maybe you have a service that looks something like that, a lot of traffic, but still moving. Maybe you have like rush hours, like peaks that have a burst of information. Or maybe you have service like this. And when talking about your solutions, your workloads drive traffic. And when you're designing your system, when you're designing your solution, you need to think about traffic. You need to think about your workloads, how it will act. Will it be growing? Will it be burst of information? Will it be on and off? Or the best kind, expected constant behavior? And it's good from many reasons. If you're in the cloud, you can think about elasticity. If you are in different environment, you can think about your infrastructure, to think about how many performance you will need, and to optimize for that. But it's also very useful when talking about maintaining that solution. Because you need to think about monitoring, and you need to think about flexibility, and you need to think about logs and how you manage everything. Which leads us to the next point. Production is only the beginning. When you press deploy, and it doesn't matter in which system you do it, it can be manually running the service, it's only the beginning. In that step, your service is born, your solution is born. But you still need to think about maintaining it. Who will maintain it? How? You need to think about monitoring it. You need to think about flexibility. You need to think about debugging. And in my past, I was leading a team of developers that were platform engineering team. And the best advice I could give those developers were, if you're not sure what is the monitor that needs to be set. If you're not sure what level of documentation you need to be in the code, think about it like someone wake you up in the middle of the night and you need to solve it. And not just you, but your team member. You are waking up in the middle of the night, you get that alert. Do you get what it means? Do you know how to solve it? That time is not just bleeding money for the company. It's not just like you losing sleep. But that margin of time, from the time you get the alert until it's resolved, this is the critical time for your service stability, for yourself and your team understanding of the product, and your stability in general, your mental stability, I mean. And how can we do a presentation about architecture without talking about cost? So everything at the price tag, infrastructure, services, people. Bugs cost money. To solve bugs cost money. So when I'm talking about cost, I'm talking about infrastructure. For in the cloud, it maybe it's clearer now. There's like bill in the end of the month. But we also have resources like people. The time it takes you to solve that bug, it's money. It's your team member, it's your PM, it's communicating to the customer. It's how you look through the eyes of your customer. And if he will renew that prescription next time. And it's also the cost of adding functionality. It's not just solving problems. Let's say you want to add another feature. How long, how much complexity it will take you in order to solve that functionality, to add that functionality. So I want to recap what we just covered and to summarize that from the need, we create a solution. And in that process, we need to understand the problem we are trying to solve. We understand the constraints that we have, the real one, not the one that we are used to understand the context that we are at, the team that we are at, the company, the resource that we have, our priorities, the service priority. We need to ask questions and keep challenging ourselves and others to build better products. We need to think about our workloads, our traffic, how the service will act. It's very different if it's an ETL, if it's web service, if you are e-commerce and it's before Black Friday. You need to adjust your infrastructure. Production is only the beginning, and you need to think about it from day one when you do your research and considering the cost. And if there's one thing that you can take from today, I hope it will be that architecture is not that scary. And if we all think before we implement our product, if we implement the same logic as we do in our daily life, as driver, on the road and outside, to your architecture, to our solution, we will build better solution for that. And I invite you all to reach out for me in any social media that you can that you like. You can also see in that link my article in Medium that talk about 6 things you shouldn't forget when you architect a system. And I also ask you to provide feedback, because feedback is the one most amazing gift that you can give to a presenter. And the second one is a happy selfie. So I will ask you to be very happy and excited while I'm doing that selfie.